Hey and welcome to Game Talk. I'm your host, Connor Haynes, and today I'm joined by Mike.
Hello.
And not Ahmed today. He had a work thing to take care of. So, just us today. So I thought Mike and I could talk about some retro games that we're into, and why we like them, what the appeal is, that sort of thing. So, I thought the smart thing to do first was define retro, which Mike and I had some trouble doing. The way I think about it,
at this point.
It's very nebulous. Like I watch a YouTuber who collects retro games. Shout out to Cody with a K, and he includes like Xbox 360 and PS3 in there. I would say, in my mind, it's anything that plugs into a CRT, which I guess does include the PS3 and the Xbox 360. It's just not really what I think of.
Yeah, if you ask some people when they define retro games, it's like, oh, only SNES and older. But at this point, those are downright ancient. Like the SNES was
The SNES is the 90s.
technology,
Yeah. 80s tech came out. I actually don't know when it came out. Was it 90?
1990 in Japan, 1991 in NA. So it's over 30 years old now.
Yeah. So I collect retro games a little, or I did before it got really expensive in 2020. And I have a very modest Super NES collection, a pretty decent N64 collection, a sizable NES collection, and all the GameCube games I had as a kid. I haven't bought a GameCube game as an adult. I just have all the ones I had as a child. And it's weird thinking about that as retro to me now, because GameCube especially, GameCube and Wii still can look modern.
Yeah, those were like my childhood games, so it's weird to think of those as people looking back and thinking, oh, that's retro, right. It's ancient gaming, because it makes me feel older than I am.
I play them for a different reason. Like, I play the GameCube and the N64, and even the Super NES to some extent. I actually had a Super NES growing up. I had one for a little bit. So those games are nostalgic to me, but my actual favorite console to collect for is the NES. And I obviously I have no nostalgia for those games. I just really like them. I really like to play Castlevania and Super Mario Bros. 3. I think there's like a simplicity to those games that isn't lost, I would say, but it's rare in modern games. It's they have a lot more focus a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's rare to just be able to throw out a game where the only mechanics are jump and walk to the right.
Yeah. Like the NES, you only have 4 buttons and a D-pad. Like that's all you get, and you're gonna have to
when you look
the
at
select button.
Super Mario Bros. There isn't a lot of mechanical depth to any of the first 3 or 4 Super Mario Bros. At all.
Right.
Like, it is simply walk to the right and jump. And the basic mechanic.
And it's really fun.
Add something else.
They're really fun games. I don't like to go pre-NES. That's just too far back for me, typically.
Like, Atari is... Like, there are people that love Atari games, but at that point, gaming was so, like, amoebic, I guess is the term. Like, protozoan, almost.
Yeah.
That, like, it's barely recognizable, and the pixel density is just not enough to understand really what's going on.
Right. The NES is where what I would call modern game design came into play. Like, you can see modern game design in Zelda 2, a little bit. Like, Castlevania is still pretty arcadey, but come Castlevania 3, it gets a little easier. You can and Castlevania 2 as well, although not the best of the trilogy, but you can definitely see, like, the prototypical Metroidvania is hiding in Castlevania 2 and the first Metroid.
Yeah.
And I love those games. I actually have, my NES is hooked up right now, and I was playing Castlevania 3 the other day, which is what made me think to cover this topic.
Yeah, and I do a lot of retro PC gaming, which
is interesting in its own way.
Even more interesting, because at the same time consoles were doing weird stuff, or like they were releasing like their Halos and everything. At that point, that Halo came out, which is the prototypical console FPS. PCs had been doing it since the early days, the hackling days.
I mean,
of,
Wolfenstein, and
shooters.
Yeah, and there were first-person RPGs even before Wolfenstein, I think, but I'm not certain about that. Like dungeon crawlers.
PC retro game is a lot harder to get into than old consoles, because old
Yeah,
consoles,
there aren't a lot of emulators. Like some of those games work on modern hardware. There's been preservation attempts to keep them working.
Thank you, GOG and CD Projekt Red, for putting at least some effort in re-releasing games to a marketplace.
And playing a modern PC game is very different to me than playing or not playing a modern PC. Playing a retro PC game is very different to me than playing a retro console game, because when I'm playing retro console games, my mindset is typically make this look as close as I can. If I'm emulating it, for instance, I want it to look as close as I can. I do the CRT filters. I do whatever I can to get the most authentic experience to the original. Or if I can, I play it on original hardware.
Yeah. And in a lot of cases, especially with retro games at this current point, they're getting increasingly expensive. Like, to play a Game Boy Advance Pokemon game on original hardware, unless you already own it, it's hundreds of dollars.
It's prohibitively expensive. Yeah.
It's pricey. People are collecting those things now, and now at this point, like, emulation's being more and more appealing since...
Well, the hardware is expensive now too. Like, just getting a Game Boy Advance can be not a cheap thing to do either. So, you know, if you can get a cartridge and get the ROM off of it, then you can play it on your PC pretty easily.
Nintendo will hate you for it, because that's...
Yeah, they can hate you all they want. But if you own the cartridge, you're allowed to take the ROM off of it and play it.
And even now, like, I do see it's no longer piracy when you download a ROM of... This might be controversial. Download a ROM of, like, Pokemon Emerald, because it's not been re-released and Nintendo's not getting any more money from it.
I mean, it is, legally speaking, that is piracy.
Yeah, legally speaking, it's piracy, but it's such a gray area that I don't even consider it anymore.
It is not a gray area legally. It is. It cannot be clear enough. It is completely illegal. Morally, you can say whatever you want.
I do justify it, though. Nintendo's not getting that money. They're never going to get any more money off of Emerald. They've already sold all their copies, and the rest were, like, burned in a fire. I don't know.
Legally speaking, yes, you could. You likely won't get in trouble, but the distributors will.
Yeah, no one's going to come after you for it. Nintendo might threaten, but they really obviously don't care about their retro catalog as much as they claim to.
I do a good bit of emulation, though, because, like, I have these cartridges, but sometimes I want to play them on my bigger TV, and so I have my full library that I own also on my PC. I also have the Super NES and NES Minis that Nintendo released,
which are all emulation machines too.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, there was evidence that the ROMs they used in them were downloaded from a ROM distribution website.
That's so funny.
Yeah, because Nintendo didn't have a copy of those around or something.
Preservation's hard. Like, a lot of retro game collecting and everything, it's all about preservation.
Right, and like, a lot of older stuff won't last forever. Like, I have a modded 3DS, which isn't retro by my definition yet, but I have it modded so that I can have a backup of all of my cartridges. I have an analog pocket that I bought to play Game Boy games on, and I think I can get backups with that. I'm actually not certain.
Yeah, bit rot is a real thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I have games where the batteries have died, and I don't really want to open them up to change it. I have games, like my Pokemon Emerald copy, the battery in it is dead, and that's like a huge pain to change. That's for the real-time clock. So there are features in the game that just don't work anymore, and that is not an easy thing for a layman. Like, if you have the tools and the skills, I could probably do it, but I don't want to. I don't want to change that battery.
Yeah, like, cartridges can die, batteries can die, the contacts can corrode to the point where they're unreadable.
And it's a shame that you can't, the only Nintendo games that are available right now are available through Nintendo's online service, which I don't believe has Game Boy Advance. I know it doesn't have GameCube. I think it has Game Boy, N64, NES, and Super NES. But we know, like, very obviously there's a huge demand for these games because things like the Mii Mini and the Analog Pocket and things like that, they fly off the shelf. These are very well-selling. I don't have sales numbers, but like for a niche product, they sell very well. People love these older games, and a lot of it's nostalgia, but they're worth playing. A lot of older games are worth playing. I'm someone who really likes to see how a franchise started. So like the original Legend of Zelda, the original Devil May Cry, which, that was on PS2. And I actually I didn't emulate Devil May Cry. I bought it on Steam. But still, like, there are games that are very difficult to get the original experience on these days. A lot of stuff on the original Xbox. Actually, no, Microsoft's been really good recently.
Yeah, Microsoft's been real good about their preservation and re-releasing media in a format that's more accessible to modern audiences.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't get to praise Microsoft that often.
A good chunk of their Xbox library is still playable to this day on... Is it still on Series X, Series S? I know one it was.
It is, yeah. If it was playable on one, it is playable on Series X, I believe.
So they've been doing good effort to make sure that these games are still accessible and you can still, like, boot up the original Halo 2.
And sometimes they're enhanced, too. Like, that's what I was wanting to say about retro PC games. I play a few PC games that were released in the early 2000s, like the original Xbox era. And when I'm playing them, instead of trying to get the authentic look, I actually usually, like, if I can, I put the resolution up to modern standards. And it's interesting how those games can look running at 4K or 1440p.
Oh yeah, there's still like an odd beauty to retro 3D games.
Oh, for sure.
Which I never thought I'd say it, but some of them can be beautiful. Like Oblivion, for a game that came out in 2003.
Oblivion looks terrible,
its environments look really good.
Its environments do look
good. The character model's garbage, but the environments, they hold up really well with just the most basic enhancements.
Those characters are potatoes, though.
Yeah, I forgot what vanilla characters look like. I've modded the character models.
Oh, yeah.
So long.
I mean, even, like, Skyrim came out in 2011. Like, that'll be retro soon, I figure 15 years is, like, the cutoff.
It's getting there. Like, New Vegas is retro.
Like, just to gauge it, what am I saying? The Wii had retro games available to buy, including Nintendo 64 games. And, like, Ocarina of Time was one of them. That game came out in 1999. 98, 99? One of those two.
One of those 2 years.
And the Wii came out in, like, 07 or 06. I think it was 07. So it was, only like 10 years. And they were calling that retro, so...
Yeah, Nintendo always has been kind of iffy on their retro catalog, though.
During the Wii era, I would argue they did really well.
Yeah, the Wii era is where they really shined, but now, like...
it's the fact that stuff didn't carry forward. Because
I don't like the Switch's emulation. I think it's kind of stinky.
The Switch's emulation is weird and bad. The Nintendo's just had a lot of misplays in this arena, which sucks because I would argue they have the most precious catalog to me of games.
Yeah, they were a heavy hitter back in the 90s and early 2000s.
But I don't want to rent. I don't want to do Nintendo Online and, like, those games go away when I stop paying. I mean, I don't play anything on Nintendo Online at all. Yeah. I never really have. I just don't like it. I don't like the way it works. I don't like that model. I want to buy those games and just own them permanently. So I have done that. I own the cartridges. Sometimes it's a little hard to get them to work, but I actually have like a cool little setup. I have a whole shelf full of games. I have a CRT TV that I have all my consoles plugged into. I have like a splitter for component cables and have that all hooked up. It's pretty nice. I only really play the NES, and the GameCube occasionally, but it's all hooked up and it's very fun. Do you so you mostly do PC, so you're playing that on your like modern gaming rig?
Oh yeah.
Mostly.
Which it has a lot of there's a lot of issues with trying to play ancient PC games that
I know.
Like consoles don't even see. Like a console, if it works, it works. You can plug it in, it'll play.
I dated this girl briefly who was like really into the old Nancy Drew games.
Anything pre-2008 is a nightmare on modern systems.
It was quite a nightmare trying to get that to run.
You, at this point with Windows 10 and everything, you have to crack the games. Like illegally break their DRM because it's just not supported. Like if they use SecuROM, it's over. You have to download a crack.
There were very common DRM practices back then that were like, I think Spore, the original launch of Spore, you could only install it.
Licenses.
You could only install it 3 times and then you were done. I think they upped that to 10 at some point, which is still like...
Still dumb.
Yeah, ridiculously low.
Back then, they kind of imagined you wouldn't have that many games, but now I look through my entire Steam library and weep. Like,
right. Yeah, I mean, that was pre-Steam, I think.
Yeah, it was right
at
the same time as Steam, but at that point, Steam wasn't letting third-party games on.
Wasn't Steam like 2002?
Steam was with the orange box. Steam as a service launch 2003. 2003. Years ago.
That's what I thought. So actually, Steam had been on the field for a while before Spore came out.
And so they have no excuse. Late 2005 is when they swapped it to allow third party.
Yeah.
But no one was adopting Steam. Like, I think the first exposure to Steam I had was Civ 5, because the disc just came with a code for Steam and a quick download. And that was it. That was my first exposure to Steam.
Yeah.
The calendar year of 2010.
So what about you when you're playing retro games? Is it usually games from your childhood, or are you playing games you've never played before, typically?
A little bit of both, actually.
Yeah.
At this point, and of course retro-styled games, but like when I went through and played through all the Ace Combats, or most of the Ace Combats, those were all considered retro games now.
Oh my god, you're right. Yeah, and that's often why I do it. Yeah, I like to go back and play the full series on games.
I had missed all the games. I'm like, oh wow, I missed these, and now they're here for me.
What's really strange is like the games we consider like retro style have been mimicking a style, like they've been mimicking the same style for a very long time. Like Cave Story was a retro style game in like 2010, and it looks like it was doing Super NES style, which is still the style that retro games are usually trying to emulate now in 2024.
Yeah, like the SNES style of pixel art, which no one's managed to do like super effectively. Like they've gotten close. But
I mean, I prefer when games try to do NES. Super NES doesn't have... The limitations are more obscure, I would say, so it's like harder to get that style right.
Yeah.
Whereas like the NES limitations are obvious. So like a game like Shovel Knight that tries to adhere mostly to the NES style, it's obvious what they were doing.
Yeah, because they have a limited number of colors and everything. But I don't think any game's going to manage the sprite work of like late stage pixel art games.
Well, we have high fidelity pixel art games that are like beautiful and stuff, but they're never going to look retro. That's the funny thing about the Super NES is that other than its low resolution, later Super NES games didn't look that retro. Like they looked Link to so the Past
good. Looked good.
Yeah, they looked so good that it's hard to believe there was any limitation at all. You couldn't tell
there were sprites. It looked like they were like you couldn't see the pixels really.
I mean, even Super Castlevania 4 is a gorgeous game. Yeah. You know, if that released tomorrow, I would think that it was, you know, that would be fine.
With things like aliasing and everything, it gets really hard and muddy to see pixels anymore, unless you're really paying attention.
So when you're emulating a game, do you like to see the pixels or do you like the CRT filters and stuff?
I'd like the pixels, honestly.
I do not like... So now, you know, me and Amit are always beating the OLED drum, but like with an OLED and a very high resolution screen, and I don't know that the OLED part is as necessary as the 4K screen, but you can actually like pretty accurately use shaders to mimic a CRT. The OLED is nice because it's low latency, much like a CRT. There is more latency than a CRT would have, but not by a whole lot. And you can also, like with things like RetroTink and stuff, you can actually plug a modern console or a retro console into a modern TV.
Yeah.
And you can get a pretty good experience out of those now. It's still not the same as the CRT, and it's also very finicky. I use RetroArch, and I have probably spent more time fiddling with the shaders and stuff to try to get the look that I want it to have than I have actually playing the games. But some of those older games, just the way that they used the technology at the time makes it really impacts. I mean, sometimes in huge ways, like Sonic 3 used CRT blending, the way the pixels would sort of blend together to do transparency. And when you play that on a modern display, you can't see that at all. It looks very silly. It doesn't look anything like how they intended it to. And you can actually get that to work in RetroArch with a little effort. And I think even on the Analog Pocket has some stuff for frame blending to make that work. But you do have to go out of your way, whereas if you can just plug into a CRT, you get that authentic look right off the bat. And things like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, I never really thought was a very good-looking game until I saw it the way it was originally supposed to be seen, and you don't see the pixel art, like, where it's so detailed and, like, the pixels kind of blend together. It actually looks almost kind of painterly to me once you're looking at it the way that you would have seen it back in the day when it came out. And stuff like that's just so interesting to me.
Yeah, it's very interesting to look at older games and see how much effort they put into making them look as beautiful as possible with their given limitations. Like,
right,
you look
and
at,
even
like, super late Pokemon sprites on, like, the DS.
Yeah.
And how detailed they made these sprites on a system that sometimes barely functioned.
Yeah, I definitely think something was lost in the jump to 3DS with Pokemon, because the 2D lost 2D art is so expressive.
Like,
and
Black and White was beautiful.
I haven't played Gen 5.
Like, a lot of the world art and the world design was beautiful, and a lot of that was lost when they jumped to 3D.
I actually really, really like the Game Boy Color Pokemon Crystal. That one. I was playing it on my Analog Pocket for the first time, and it's really interesting how much they got out of so little. Like, they couldn't do the flashy move animations and stuff that they have now, so, like, they got a lot of mileage out of screen shake and, like, different effects that were very, like, code intensive on a Game Boy. I know, because I've done some Game Boy code before. I think retro development is really fascinating, and those things are not easy to do. So it's really cool to see what they were able to communicate without being able to give a bespoke animation for every attack.
Yeah.
I'm also, like, really into Advance Wars. Although those got a modern remake recently on the Switch.
I've never played Advance Wars.
I think you'd like them. You're into strategy games. They are turn-based, though. I got into them after I played Wargroove, and that's another thing that's pretty common, is I will play, like, a spiritual successor, and if I really like it, I gotta go back and see what the inspiration was. I actually, I didn't play Super Metroid until after I'd played Hollow Knight.
That's wild.
Yeah, and I like Hollow Knight more, but I love Super Metroid.
Yeah, something we lost, like, we as a gaming community lost something when we finally made that jump to 3D.
It's so funny, right? Because we get 2D games now, but there are not a lot of 2D games on the N64. The only one I can think of off the top of my head, we have Smash Bros. And Kirby. And Klonoa, maybe? Did that come to the N64? The PS1 got a little bit better treatment there. I got some Mega Man games and Castlevania. But, we didn't get a 2D Mario. We got Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island, if you count it. And then we didn't get another 2D Mario until the late 2000s with New Super Mario Bros. It was in 2006, I think, 2007.
Yeah, like, it kind of died for a while because 2D was seen as inferior. And now 2D's back in a kind of big way.
Yeah.
Sonic 2D is separate from Sonic 3D for some reason, and they justify that by having you travel through time and space.
Yeah.
To put them on the screen.
Back to when the games were good.
Yeah. I honestly
Sonic
think,
Adventure 2. I'm a diehard Sonic Adventure 2 fan.
Yeah, I think Sonic hit with, like, their first 2 3D games.
Yeah.
And then they just fell off so hard, and then a side dev comes in.
Or what was right after that? Sonic Heroes?
Was Heroes, yeah.
Yeah, Heroes.
And then this...
Something Lost.
Yeah, this side, like, fan dev comes in, who did, like, a port of the original Sonic to mobile devices, comes in and releases the best Sonic games since the 2D games.
Yeah.
And it's just
I would argue
2D
better.
Sonic game.
I think Sonic Mania is the best 2D Sonic game.
Oh, yeah. And then there was the next Sonic Mania. Didn't they release another one?
No.
I thought they released another 2D Sonic.
Sonic Superstars, but it's not retro style. It's like 2.5D.
Ah.
It's apparently pretty good, though. I didn't play it.
The bosses are awful.
Okay.
For a Steam review, I thought Sonic Mania was getting a sequel.
I wish, but no. I think that development team has moved on to their own stuff.
Christian Whitehead. I guess, yeah. They did their Encore DLC, though, so, I mean, that's fine. It's just super interesting, like, to see the evolution of 2D games as well.
Right.
Like, Sonic's one of those franchises that kind of represents a lot of retro gaming for a lot of people. Same with Mario, same with like Crash Bandicoot at this point, Spyro the Dragon. They're all retro properties at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And their best games were during that era.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Spyro 3 is the only one I played as a kid. I really enjoyed Spyro 1 and what I've played of 2. But yeah, such a deep well of nostalgia. I actually don't like collecting PlayStation 1 games though. Something about cartridges feel better to collect than discs do. I can't say for sure why. I think it's this is kind of funny. The easier it is to pirate a game, the less I want to collect it, I think. And it was very, very easy to pirate PlayStation 1 games. So I don't want to get into like, oh, is this a real disc? Is it authentic and stuff? I don't want to have to think about all that. It's another reason I wouldn't buy like GBA Pokemon games, because a lot of those are reproduction carts.
They're just flash carts that are they might not even be locked down anymore, right?
No, they are locked down to just that game, unless they don't have like an SD card slot, if that's what you're saying. But you can reflash them. Actually, I made a Game Boy game a while back, and I never finished it. I got as far as like physics and like a little level editor sort of thing, but I never really finished the game. But my plan at the time was to buy a bunch of reproduction Pokemon games, because that was cheaper than buying blank cartridges, and I was going to reflash them myself with my game on them so that I could give it to my friends.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I thought it would be a funny thing to do.
Going even back to like flashcards and everything, those are part of retro game preservation at this point.
Yeah, they are. There's just no easy way to play those games. It's a shame that you can't. You can get video games from a library now, and it's kind of a shame that they focus on modern games. I mean, that's what people want to play. Like, I can get God of War Ragnarok from the local library here for a PS5, but I think if I wanted to go get a copy of Super Mario World, that would be a much more difficult thing to do. And they don't really rent out hardware either, so I wouldn't be able to. I have an NES, but if I didn't have an NES, I wouldn't be able to play that game. And that's a shame. And it is different. It is for all the modern quirks and stuff, playing Super Mario World on your Nintendo Switch is not the same experience as it was playing it on a Super NES. The controller was, built for that game. Which I guess you can get a Super NES controller for your Switch now. I don't know how many people actually did that. Older games also tended to they knew that there was like zero latency between you pressing the button and something happening in game, and they used that. Especially some of the older Kirby minigames, like the reaction time you needed for those was insane.
Yeah, a lot of games they never expected the hardware to evolve past where they did, especially on a console. So they designed it with particular eccentricities in the console itself, and that even makes them harder to emulate. If you don't mimic that particular hardware eccentricity, the game's just not going to function.
The first N64 emulator actually came out while the N64 was still on shelves. The Ultra HLE.
Wild.
Yeah, I think it was. I don't think the GameCube was out yet when Ultra HLE came out, and that was on a mid-range computer. You could play N64 games, and that was a paid product.
Yeah,
that
it was only
like
3 years old when the N64 came out.
That was the first high-level emulator, which is to say, it's not doing exactly what an N64 would do. It was more like interpreting the code of the game and translating it to something your computer could sort of do.
Yeah, and it could only release about 20 games.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was high-level emulation, so...
Did they have to, like, make something for each specific game?
I don't know.
Because high-level emulation is still how emulators tend to work today.
Yeah. As it emulated and simulated only the calls requested by those specific games. Okay.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
But I think modern ones just kind of emulate hardware layers instead.
Yeah. PS1 had an emulator too. Bleem, I think it was called.
Yeah, Bleem. I think Bleem's still around.
Might be. But that was I know that was where we got the court precedents that emulation still sits on today. It was because Sony tried to sue Bleem and lost.
Yep.
I thought Bleem still went out of business from it, but they did win the case. I think it was something, but it put them out of business to do it. I think it was a sad story.
Bleem. I mean, I'm not. Is their final release was 2001? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not in favor of piracy of modern games and stuff. It is just sad to see, how, my kids probably will not, the odds of my console still working by the time my kids, if I ever have them, would be old enough to appreciate them is not super high. So outside of emulation, they probably wouldn't get a chance to play a lot of these games.
Yeah. Emulation's essential for preservation at this point.
And granted, some companies are pretty good. Capcom has always been pretty good about releasing their older catalog, on emulators onto modern consoles. You can get pretty much all the Mega Man games, all the Mega Man X games. I think they even did the Mega Man ZX games, and Mega Man Zero games, which were not as popular, I don't think. They tend to do... Even Konami tends to release Castlevania collections. Yeah. I don't know that they've been good about that recently, but as recently as the Xbox One and stuff, I think they were doing that.
It's weird to see, a lot of modern publishers will just kind of throw their old games to the wind at some point. And especially now with games being always online or requiring an online component.
Right, they're just going to be gone. Yeah. Because the games of today will be retro in the not too distant future.
10, 20 years from now when Destiny's shut down and gone.
Well, Fortnite, the cultural touchstone that Fortnite is, it's just going to be gone one day.
Yeah, the Fortnite as we know it today will cease to exist, just like the Fortnite of 8 years ago doesn't exist.
Even more than that, if we're talking about Fortnite as a retro game in 10 or 20 years from now, which version are you talking about? Yeah. Because there have been so many iterations of the island and everything.
Season 1 or current season, whatever they're on. Chapter 4 or Season 3.
Also, games are getting so big now that they're harder to return to. And this isn't just modern games, but I've been playing Monster Hunter World, and I've been very interested in the series. I've thought about going back and taking a look at some of the older games. But these games are so long, I don't have... I don't have, even if they were only 20 hours long, I don't have 5 generations of 20-hour games in me to play through. Yeah. I like playing NES games because I can beat Super Mario Bros. 3 in a single sitting. And I can beat it in 20 minutes if I take the shortcuts. I don't know. 20 minutes might be a little quick. I'm not a speedrunner, but definitely less than 40.
You never really expect old games to... I don't know, 10, 20 years from now, if this podcast is still going and we talk about retro games again, inevitably, we're going to be like, man, I really miss playing insert live service game that shut down 5 years before that podcast, but I can't play it anymore. With that
right now. I can't remember the name of it, but that wrestling live service
Brawlhalla?
game. Was it Brawlhalla? No.
Yeah, it was Brawl Stars?
Brawl Stars, I think, yeah. Is that right? I gotta look it up.
Brawl Stars.
It was the Battle Royale. Rumbleverse.
Okay.
I loved Rumbleverse, and I was just talking the other day I wanted to play that game, and you can't. There's nothing left of it. Completely wiped off the face of the planet. The best I could do is go back and watch, the Northern Lion videos about it or something.
It's gone. Same with, WildStar, which was an MMO I played a while ago. It's gone. Completely gone. Gundam Evolution.
Really? That's gone?
It only lasted a year. It's gone. You can't play it anymore.
Yeah, Rumbleverse I don't even think made it 6 months. It was crazy how quick that was gone.
Overwatch 1, which at this point...
Yeah.
It's gone. You can't play Overwatch as it was.
I don't think you can play Titanfall the way that it was because their servers got hacked.
Little Big Planet 1 and 2? You can't touch those.
That's so sad.
Their online services got DDoSed and are now permanently down.
Yeah, the Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, no, not Ultimate, the original Monster Hunter 3 Try, it had the back half of the game was locked behind an always online component, which, like, Monster Hunter games are functionally, like, you thinking of them as an MMO would not be incorrect, because I think Capcom thinks of them as that on some level. So it makes sense, but all of that content could have been played single player, but you had to ping a server to access it. So once those servers went down, you couldn't even play it single player, and like a great portion of that game. And it wasn't real urgent for them because Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate existed and didn't have that problem. You could access it single player, and it still had servers up until recently when the Wii U and 3DS servers went down.
Yeah.
But there was still, like, playing that original content, you couldn't do it anymore, and that was really sad.
Oh man, I'm gonna be really disappointed when, like, kids growing up now are gonna have nostalgia for games that they can't touch anymore.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully there are ways around this, like private servers and stuff, but I am deeply nostalgic for the original Maple Story map, and it does not exist anymore in the game.
Like, we can't go back. We can go back and play, like, Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker on its original hardware, and it's the whole game. It's the game as we remember it right there.
Right.
But, like, kids in 10, 20 years, like 8-year-olds now in 20 years when they're 28 and they want to go back and play the Fortnites, the Destinies, Rainbow Six Siege, they're not going to be able to. It's just gone.
Dead by Daylight.
Yeah, all these games. And
I have said a lot about Ocarina of Time not being the greatest of all time. I do think it's a brilliant game.
I think it's
any Zelda fan should go back and play.
If you like Zelda,
set the precedent for the franchise for the next, like, nearly 20 years.
Yeah, if you like Zelda, play Ocarina of Time. Like, if you like Breath of the Wild, go get a 3DS, play Ocarina of Time.
Right. Yeah, the 3DS version is better, for sure.
It's just a better game. Like, I hate
Same
saying
with Majora's
that.
Mask.
Well, I don't hate saying that, actually. They did a good job of remaking the game while keeping everything key to the original, but making the game better.
The thing is, a game that comes out today has every advantage. Any game that comes out today should be better than a game that came out 20 years ago. You have 20 years of industry knowledge, of game design discourse, of technology. You have every possible advantage. So, and that's why the whole Ocarina of Time is the greatest of all time argument bothers me so much, is that, like, no, like, this medium has been evolving for so many years since then. Yes, like, the stuff we get today is better than the stuff we got back then. But that doesn't mean that stuff's not incredible and worth visiting.
Yeah, just because Assassin's Creed or...
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at all the Assassin's Creed games. I'm speaking of retro gaming.
We do get some detritus.
I'm buying a bunch of Assassin's Creed games at the moment, so I'm a little distracted. But like, you look at, like, Assassin's Creed 2, which fantastic game. The franchise has died since then, but fantastic games.
I don't know. That I'll be honest, Assassin's Creed Shadow has my interest. I don't trust Ubisoft at all. I'm going to wait until the reviews come out, but they've piqued my interest, especially when they made all the gamer boys mad.
Yeah, they always do. That's a whole nother episode, though, is gamer boys getting mad. But
yeah, we don't need to dig into
like,
that.
Looking back at, like, the original Halo, still a fantastic game that holds up for some reason. Oh,
absolutely. I played the original Halo for the first time during lockdown, I think, when they ported the Master Chief Collection to PC.
I'm playing through it with my girlfriend at the current moment. Well, we started the first mission, but because she always wanted to play Halo and never got the chance because she was a PlayStation kid growing up. So I'm like, oh wait, I have Halo on my PC. I could hack together a split screen option. It's fine.
I have some weird nostalgia for the split screen mode in the Xbox 360 version of Minecraft.
Oh, I love split. I think split screen co-op is something that lived and died in the retrosphere.
And it shouldn't have, because it's easier. It's something I'm hungry for now more than I've ever been in my life, probably. Like, split screen co-op, especially like we have solutions like Steam Remote Play Together, and a lot of developers just are not taking advantage of that. They want to sell 2 copies of a game. I get it. The bigger publishers are not going to be.
They don't
interested.
want people to buy one game, but at some point, like, I don't have 2 PCs at the moment.
Yeah,
like, I have one PC, and I just want to sit there and play games on from my bed, you know?
Yeah. And what kills me is when they remove the split screen from the PC port. Like, it was in the console. And even Valve is guilty of this. Like, you can use console commands to get to split screen in Left 4 Dead 2. But they just took out the menu option.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, and like, why? I mean, I get PCs did not used to be plugged into TVs back then. But like, I remember me and my friends. God, Amnesia's retro now, huh? I remember sitting down with my friends at my desk and playing Amnesia.
Yeah, I remember sitting there, having like friends gather around me, or even when I was growing up, sitting behind my dad and watching him play like Anno 1503. Which love that game. Just got it on Steam recently, and I've been playing it. But
still works.
Oh no, Ubisoft released a updated version of it that was optimized for modern computers and 4K resolution.
Nice.
Like, it just came out last month. But and like, watching people play games is something that we still do. People still do it. Like, every time I hear, why would I want to watch someone play a game on stream? Because
that's so common. Yeah.
It's something people do. Have you ever just sat there and watched your buddy play through Halo? While, sitting there eating popcorn, just talking?
It also just makes for excellent background noise while you're doing something else. Yeah. No, that's typical. Like, I have some friends that I hang out with, and typically one of them will be playing a video game while the rest of us are just like passively watching and like having a conversation that's totally unrelated.
Yeah, like, it's a social thing. Gaming's a social thing, and I feel like with our online world, we kind of lost the things that retro games had, which was that social aspect. Like, the first Halo game was designed first and foremost for you to lug a CRT and an Xbox up the hill to your friend's house.
Yes.
Bring the Mountain Dew and Doritos and just sit there all night with 8 of your friends and just frag each other on Blood Gulch until you passed out. Like, and we lost that with modern Halos. Like, we lost
there's
that.
No split screen.
Yeah, we lost that 14 hours of just straight Halo, playing it as a party game instead of as this hyper competitive Twitch shooter.
Yeah, I could talk for an hour probably about how stupid it is that the 1%, not even 1% of people that play a game competitively have sort of spoiled game design for the rest of us.
We could do a whole episode on that. I have a lot of opinions on,
because retro shooters are like, I love some old school Quake.
Yeah. Like, old shooters are so much fun, and like, there's a high skill ceiling, but it wasn't catered to those people.
Bringing Quake to Game Pass was just awesome. Like, they released a modern PC and Xbox Series X port, and me and my buddy Tyler played Quake, and I'd never played it before, and that game holds up. It was really fun to play.
Yeah, like, and looking at games like Quake, like Doom, we're definitely seeing a return to form to that retro style of shooter, even in the indie space.
Well, I mean, a lot of the best indie games, a lot of them, I'm not dunking on them by saying they're not original, but a lot of them are not terribly original. A lot of the best indie games look backwards and say, we used to do this thing. I'm going to do this thing. You know, this thing that like has been largely abandoned by modern games that I think is really cool. Yeah. And then you get Super Meat Boy, which is a super difficult platformer, which fell out of vogue. Or you get
Ultra Kill, which...
Yeah, Ultra Kill, Shovel Knight, like
they were hits. They were big hits. They made their money.
Stardew Valley,
they made their money, and then they kind of fell off over time, and that's fine.
Yeah,
a game doesn't need to be forever. Like, I'm sure people that played Super Meat Boy now look back and think, "Man, I want to play through Super Meat Boy again."
Yeah, I have very fond memories of that game.
They'll get the itch, and I think that's as important for a game, is to have people come back a decade, 15, 20 years later and play it again. A lifetime of enjoyment for one game. Like, I still like going back and playing through Ocarina of Time.
Oh yeah, it is the game. I think I've not. It is the game that takes over 2 hours to beat that I've beaten the most times. I think,
and I've played it randomized. Also fun.
Oh yeah,
like the game's good. Like good games hold up to the test of time, and if you you might think, oh, but you're not talking about obscure shooter that I have nostalgia for from the Xbox.
There's also something lost in the modern era of buying a game because of the art.
Yeah.
This is something I have experienced. I had never heard of Blaster Master before, and I was just at a retro game shop, and they had a copy of Blaster Master. It was like under $10, and I was like, this looks sick. I'm gonna buy it. And I did not expect it to be good at all. But I got home, I popped it into my NES, and it turns out that game slaps.
That's how they sold the kids. You had this really appealing cover art sitting on the shelf of like a GameStop or like a Hollywood Video, and kids would be like, Dad, I want this.
It makes you wonder how Mega Man ever sold a single copy, because the art is hideous on early Mega Man.
Sounds, yeah.
But I loved, like, that's just an experience, like, I don't get that very often, because typically, like, anywhere you look now, you're immediately facing critic reviews, user reviews, all of that. And those are all, I'm not saying that's bad. That is all very pro-consumer. But the lens you look at things through is tainted by that.
Yeah.
You know, if Blaster Master had cost me $60, I would have probably Googled it before I bought it, you know?
Yeah, everything's expensive, and no one's kind of willing to drop money on a game that they're not sure about, unless the critics are like, yeah, buy it.
I mean, people also just don't have a ton of money these days.
People don't have the money they used to.
Yeah.
Or games are more expensive than they used to be, and it's really hard to find a good game that's a good...
I mean, people are looking for something different than they were back in the day. People are looking for a game that they can, you know... People that don't have a ton of money to spend on gaming are not looking for the 3-hour experience of a retro game. You know, they're looking for the 100-hour experience. You know, something they're really going to be able to sink their teeth in to get their money's worth out of. And that's just fine. Like, that's, what you do is what you do.
Yeah, and there's still a market for short games. I love games that I don't have to sink thousands of hours into. I can beat in like a night or two.
Yeah. I have an appetite for both, I think.
Yeah.
But largely, I like a game that is sub 20 hours, something, you know, your Alan Wake, your Uncharted, your that sort of thing.
Yeah, like...
Or even Animal Well, if you're not going to do everything.
Like, Control was just, was a good length game.
Oh, yeah.
Only 20 hours, really, ish.
Maybe a little longer if you wanted to do everything.
Yeah, I think I clocked with everything but the DLC. Hold on, what did I clock into? 16.8 hours. And
yeah,
I did
that's about right.
Pretty much everything except the DLC, but yeah.
The DLC is good, by the way.
Yeah, I need to play it. I was waiting until ray tracing, and now that I have ray tracing, I should play it again, but I haven't bothered.
That's like a huge issue for me too. I tend to I've done this with my retro games. I've done this with modern games where I'll be like, I'm saving up to buy a better graphics card, or I'm saving up to buy a CRT, or I'm saving up to buy a better TV for modern games, where I'll like put off playing a game until my setup is quote unquote perfect. And that's why I never played the Doom Eternal DLC. By the time I had the stuff to play it, the stuff that I had just like arbitrarily decided in my head I needed, by the time I had it all, the game wasn't new anymore. And I just didn't feel... Yeah.
Like, and I'm glad that companies are kind of re-releasing games or remastering retro games. Or even just like, just putting the bare minimum on PC of just giving them compatibility patches. Unless they're Bethesda, and then they just break everything.
Yeah. I think the Master Chief Collection is like, to my eye, the gold standard. I love that you can like press a button and see the original graphics in the Master Chief. I that is so much to me. Because I think I like the older graphics more than the new ones.
I liked the ability to swap between like retro and new.
I'm also somebody, I don't know if you do this, but when a remaster comes out, I like to go back and play the original. I typically don't play remasters. I just am interested in playing the original because it was good enough to get a remaster.
If it's a remaster, then I'll play the original. But if it's a straight remake, like the Dead Space one, That usually, if they decide to remake it, it means the mechanics didn't age that well.
Sometimes that's true, but
like all the Resident Evil remakes, I heard were fantastic.
Yeah, they are, but I would argue they don't really capture the spirit of the originals. Not to say that they're bad games. I think the Resident Evil remakes are masterful.
I heard Resident Evil 2 remake was probably the best remake of the whole batch.
I haven't finished it yet, but I started it and I really, really, really enjoyed it. But I think when you modernize the controls and the camera movement to the level that they did, you are like, there was a reason they were like that, and it wasn't like a technical limitation necessarily. Or it wasn't exclusively a technical limitation. Some of it was, the Resident Evil games looked like that. They had a fixed camera so that they could use pre-rendered backgrounds and make the game very, very pretty for very low graphical cost. But I would argue that like the tank controls and stuff were part of the experience, and you don't get any of that in the modern remakes. So they're just very different games in that way.
I really liked the remake of Resident Evil 2 where like they made Mr. X absolutely terrifying still. Like they captured the horror of the first.
Isn't that 3?
No, that 3 was Nemesis. 2 had Mr. X who'd kind of
weird. I don't think I've seen him yet.
Was Mr. X in 2? Hold on. I think he might have.
No, he's in 2 or 3. He's in one of those. Because 4 is when...
Yeah, Mr. X is in there. He's the guy in the trench coat.
I haven't seen him yet, I don't think.
Yeah, he's fairly early, right?
Oh, no, I did see him. But you like see him and then you don't see him for a long time after. Yeah, and I saw him before I got into the police station.
Yeah, he kind of walks at you for a while. But I think that's just as threatening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. PS2 really has some real bangers.
Yeah, that's why I want to say the PlayStation 2 is probably one of the greatest consoles of all time.
It's up there. Definitely beats the PS3.
Don't look at our episode about it. We all were mad about that. Every single one of us was angry.
Definitely beats the PS3. Like, oh my god.
So many good games.
Did you know the Switch is on track to quite possibly outsell the PS2?
I'd bet. Although the Switch...
At the end of its lifetime, the PS2 or the Switch is at like 120 million right now, I think, sales. And at the end of its lifetime, when the PS3 came out, I guess it's not the end of its lifetime, but when the PS3 came out, the PS2 was at 116 million. So it sold another like 50 million after that, which is kind of crazy.
Huh, did you know that Ace Combat Zero was called the Balkan War in Europe?
Did you ever play the PSP one?
The PSP Ace Combat?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
I didn't know it existed until
I forgot
this
that
weekend.
It existed.
Yeah, you got to go back and play it.
I'm looking at a list of like PlayStation 2 games, and there's Ape Escape, all the Armored Core games up until 3.
Yeah.
God, I'm gonna have to go back and play all of them, aren't I?
Got to do what you got to do.
Oh dear, that's a lot of games.
We've
gone on games.
We've talked about retro games for about an hour now. I think we should probably wrap it up. Is there any closing thoughts you have, Mike?
Not really.
I would say if this is something that interests you, Miu Mini, great route to go. My buddy Tyler has one. I think it's a Miu Mini that he has. He likes it. A lot of little handheld emulators you can do. A lot of setting it up on your PC.
You can do it on your mobile phone.
Easy.
If you have an Android, you can get RetroArch
even on iPhone.
On there.
You can do it on iPhone now. RetroArch is on iPhone.
Let's get RetroArch. It gets you everything you need except for, I think, a BIOS and the games.
Yeah, I recommend you get a controller if you're going to do it on mobile. You don't want to play these games on a touchscreen because sometimes there are ports of these games. Like I think Castlevania Symphony of the Night has an iPhone port that's pretty good, but I would not recommend playing an emulator on an iPhone with touch controls unless you're playing something turn-based.
And if you have money, just buy original hardware. It's pricey.
Original hardware.
I wouldn't recommend it if you're like working minimum wage, but like
if you can get you can get a CRT for free on Facebook Marketplace a lot of the time. If you can get a CRT, if you can get some of these older consoles, it's an experience that isn't
pricey.
Yeah. But sometimes you also I had to repair my NES. I had to change the 72-pin connector in it. If that statement was like horrifying to you, you probably shouldn't bother. You should probably emulate, because these consoles are old. They don't necessarily work. Even if they work when you buy them, they won't necessarily work a year from now. If you're not a little comfortable doing repair stuff, you might not. You might want to go the emulation route, either through modern re-releases or what have you.
Yep.
Yeah, let's jump over to games we've been playing. You want to go first, Mike?
So I've been playing TerraTech recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember. I think the only thing I know about that game is that people were mad about how short it was when it came out, but I think it was pretty well liked other than that.
It's a vehicle building game.
Oh, I'm thinking of the wrong game entirely.
Yeah, you're thinking of a completely different game, maybe.
Yeah, I am. I'm thinking of a strategy game where you're like trying to do environmentally friendly things to build like a factory.
Yeah, I don't remember what that one was called.
Yeah, TerraTech Worlds, right? And you build vehicles and...
TerraTech Worlds, yeah, that's the sequel, I think.
Oh, you're playing the original?
Yeah, I'm playing the original TerraTech, which still getting updates and everything. Worlds, I think, is just like their open world game.
I was thinking of Terra Nil. If anyone
Terra Nil is what you're thinking of. TerraTech Worlds is the PvP, PvE game that's a survival game.
Interesting. Okay.
But the whole gameplay loop circles around building modular vehicles with blocks. So it plays very much like Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I'm having a lot of fun. I unlocked, like, there's 6 corporations in the game that do different things and are good at different things. And the second one you unlock is this big construction company. So they have, like, the big, ugly yellow blocks and giant drills and everything.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been driving around the most janky excavator known to man. Covered in grenade launchers.
Yeah.
But I've been having a lot of fun playing it. I think I put like 8 hours in it in the last week, and I barely scratched the surface, and I unlocked like the 3rd corp, I think. But very fun. Very fun to just drive around and experiment with vehicle combinations to defeat other random AI vehicles that drive around.
I want to say I tried this game a few years ago on Game Pass.
I don't know.
I'm looking now.
Is it on Game Pass?
There was definitely a vehicle builder I tried on Game Pass, but I can't remember what it was called.
Might be on Game Pass. My Xbox doesn't work.
I'm looking right now. No, it's not. So I don't know what I played, unless they've taken it off, which isn't unlikely.
They could have. It might have been there. It might not have been. I don't know. I've been having fun with it. I think I got in a Humble Bundle recently.
Okay, yeah.
Crawling through it.
Dude, that shout out to the Monster Hunter. If I've interested anybody, shout out to the Monster Hunter Humble Bundle that's up right now. You get World and Rise and all the DLC.
Oh, was there really a Monster Hunter Humble Bundle up?
Yeah.
I don't look at it that often. It'll just get advertised to me on like Facebook. And
I ended up picking it up. Yeah, I picked it up to get the Rise DLC because it was cheaper to buy the bundle than it was to buy the DLC by itself. So
there's a Metrovania bundle.
Yeah.
Dungeon crawlers. Yeah, Humble Bundle is a great service.
Yeah, it is.
But TerraTech, love the game, I love building vehicles. I love solving problems by building vehicles. I like games that just give me parts and tell me, go for it, build what you want out of these blocks. It'll work. There's a fine line in vehicle construction games between like accessible and, oh god, I need a mechanical engineering degree to understand what's going on. And TerraTech falls onto that accessible side because there's no need to like program things to make planes or to like sit there and edit a programming interface to even make a stable quadcopter. It just works. You just put a gyroscope on there and it works.
See, I want that stuff though.
Like I love it, but I don't have the time to sit there. And like if it requires me to do objectives with that, and like I'd rather have it simple and accessible rather than me spending like 3 hours troubleshooting how a missile would work.
Yeah.
And programming an advanced missile guidance program instead of just sticking a missile launcher on there and saying it was a good day, saying it was a day.
Yeah.
Make your vehicle game accessible if the point of it is to solve problems, or else I'm not going to build planes. I'm just going to build the same car that can do everything every single time.
Yeah.
Like, why would I fiddle with the advanced stuff when the basic stuff just works?
For sure. Yeah, I hear you.
But Like, so far, it hasn't pressured me to build planes, even though I think I've built one already. Overall, very interesting, very fun, a little difficult at times, because sometimes it throws an enemy that you're not equipped to deal with at you. I've done a lot of, like, iterations on my big excavator machine, and it's gone through, like, 2 or 3 different iterations after it's gotten, like, scrapped once or twice.
A streamer that I really like, a guy named Dean Dobbs, is on the team for TerraTech Worlds, and I haven't caught any of the streams for it. I've been too busy, but might be something I have to look into.
Yeah, I think Worlds is still early, but the base game, how much is on Steam right now? It's $25.
Yeah,
with R&D
TerraTech Worlds
Labs,
is only $30. Yeah,
with R&D Labs, it's like $32, and R&D Labs is its experimental parts. Mm-hmm. It's like a creative mode with weird parts and everything.
That's fun. I have played a little tiny bit of a few games. I've still been chipping away at Monster Hunter World. I think I reached the end of my patience on Animal Well. I think I'm just going to watch the rest of it. I've not found any rabbits and stuff. I don't think I've made any progress since last week's episode, actually, which is sad. That's not true, because I don't think I had any rabbits last week. I have a few rabbits now, but I just don't see myself playing much more of it.
No, you finally got burnt out on the Animal Well deep dive?
Yeah, it just, I don't know. You go a little while without finding anything. It wore me out. I don't know.
Image probably still deep in that community.
He's probably watching the community, yeah, but he's done with the game too. I'm pretty sure. I don't think he's playing anymore. And I also dipped a toe back into Hades because of all the hype around Hades 2. And I'm glad I did so, because I remembered I don't like Hades that much.
Is it because it has a reset system in a roguelite?
It's the stat system. I don't think Hades is a bad game, but I do think Hades is a pretty terrible roguelike, because it just doesn't really do the stuff that I'm looking for in a roguelike. It doesn't have, to my knowledge, it doesn't have like the secret ending, the secret like super long run ending stuff that is kind of a staple for me. It doesn't, you spend a lot more time with Zagreus getting stronger, in my opinion, than you actually getting better at the game. Like, I don't feel like I ever got meaningfully better at Hades, and I've beaten it a few times. My numbers got bigger until I beat the game. And I also just, like, I don't find the items and stuff that you can pick up all that interesting, personally. It seems like the most important decision you make is which weapon you're going to take in. And then from there, you're just getting numbers after that, mostly. And that's, I don't know, somebody would probably argue with me that. I'm not saying it's a bad game. I think the story is very compelling in Hades. The writing is amazing. I think the combat is fine. I actually don't love it, I guess, but it's fine. It's passable to deliver the like really good parts of the game, which is the narrative. I see why everybody loves it. It's extremely accessible. It's probably, if you are someone who wants to try out a roguelike, this is a really good game to start with, because it's a really shallow, I would say it's very shallow in its roguelike stuff to kind of dip your toe in before you jump into like the real deal, like a Noita or a Spelunky or something like that. But it doesn't stand next to something like Noita, in my mind. A hardcore roguelike where you start with the same gear every time, and it's all about the random stuff you can find on your way into the dungeon and stuff. It's just not that. So,
yeah, that's it.
I don't even think Hades is a bad game. I think it's more that I come in with a lot of baggage because it bills itself as a roguelike, and it doesn't meet those expectations for me. But I'm glad I played it again, because now I know that I shouldn't waste my money on Hades 2.
Yeah, you're gonna wait till it's on sale and then maybe touch it.
Yeah, right. Like, because again, I did beat Hades. I liked it enough to finish it, but I don't know, the hype made me want to go back, and then I went back and I realized, no, that's okay.
Yeah, I've never played Hades, actually.
I mean, it's an easy recommendation. Most people really like it.
Yeah, so, all my friends have been talking about Hades 2, and I've been deep diving into Hades 2 recently, so I've been
like, it's easily, even with all my beefs, it's easily like an 8 out of 10 for what it is. It's just if you go into it expecting like a hardcore roguelike, you're going to be deeply disappointed. So on that note, I think we're ready to wrap it up.
Yep. This is where we talk about the socials, but none of us remember it because Amit always does this.
Yep, that's Amit's part. But follow us on our socials. Join us on Discord. Continue the conversation. Like, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, every other podcast service.
I think we're Podcast Game Talk on Instagram.
At Podcast Game Talk on Instagram. I don't remember our TikTok.
Yeah, anyway, find us on our socials. It'll all be in the description. See you guys next week.
Yep, see you next week.